Hey there, welcome back to the show. This is Phil Vischer. I'm here with Skye Jitani.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good.
And Christian Taylor.
Hey, Phil.
Hi.
How are you?
It's fall colors.
Well, actually, it's a shade off of pink, which is spring colors.
That is more than one shade off of pink. That's like burgundy.
No, it's like purple. We're going with purple.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm wearing
It's
black.
kind of
Skye's
folly
wearing black
today.
for those of you that aren't watching the video.
You know, it's kind of not like spring. Today.
Yeah, it's a little.
And it's going to snow on Thursday.
Really?
This is my
No, it
morning
isn't.
outfit.
No,
Yes, it is.
It is not. It is not.
Okay, you're right. It's Tuesday.
It's not.
I'm checking
Actually,
that right
I think
now.
it is
not.
Thursday.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So engineer. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Skye.
Hi.
And Christian, too.
He's just phoning it in.
He is.
No, I'm looking at the weather.
Hi.
Hi. And we've got a guest here just for you.
It's Tuesday, right?
His name is Scott. Hey, it's a podcast. So engineer. Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
Maybe Thursday. There's a snowflake on Thursday.
There's a snowflake on Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had our first podcast party.
Yeah, we did.
We had a podcast party.
After 5 years.
Yeah.
What took us so long?
The fifth anniversary podcast. Is that what we're calling it?
I
Is that what it
didn't
was?
really have
The first-
a purpose.
It was at the Jitani's home, and even the interns got to come.
Yes.
They weren't allowed to eat anything.
And it
but
was actually the interns that made the evening so interesting,
we had kind of a generational gap.
to say the least.
Yeah. We've got two millennial interns and one of their millennial spouse. And
We're talking 22, 23.
And then there were four of us couples who were all 40 to 50,
right.
basically.
That's true.
So there was a gap. For
So
sure.
there was 20 to 23 and 40 to 50.
Most significant when we were talking about television and how
Yeah.
we consume television
Yeah.
then and now.
Yeah, we had to tell them what a TV network was.
We did.
They had no
We did.
idea. Okay.
The best question was,
Yeah.
so how do you watch TV? Or what do you watch on TV?
Where do you find, what is this
yeah,
TV?
it was like
do you have a TV? Sometimes I felt like I was talking with the Amish at one
No,
point.
it seemed like we were talking to immigrants, like people from a completely different culture,
That is true.
and we're just trying to
That is true.
understand one
Have
another.
you ever heard of a 8-track? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, we went through different media.
And your husband Jeremy felt like he had to talk really loudly to them so that they would understand.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And slowly.
And the less they understood, the louder he got.
That was maybe the wine or the whiskey. I'm not quite sure.
Hey, we don't have to share those details.
Well, you know, you were
Okay.
making some pretty sweet caramel whiskey
Hey,
thingies.
That's
Hey, okay. News. In the news, we had a couple short stories because we have a good guest on today, and we want to talk about him and his book.
I know what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about the Hobby Lobby pregnant cafeteria.
No.
that was a April Fool's joke.
I know. I was going to try to April Fool our audience.
No,
you
they're too
were?
smart.
Okay. What was? I didn't read the story. What was? I saw the story.
There's an
go out. What
article
was the
that
story?
Hobby Lobby was going to open restaurants just for pregnant women
In their stores.
in their stores, like a buffet.
While they could eat while they shopped.
Because there's so many pregnant women in their stores?
I don't know.
Because Hobby Lobby doesn't pass out contraceptives on their health plan? Is that
Oh,
what it was
that
about?
probably could have been it.
There's something like that.
Yeah,
but,
something like that. Well, okay, let's vote. Is that funny or not?
It wasn't.
I'm voting no.
Funny, no.
I don't find that funny.
So what have you got?
Okay. This is from the file of what Jesus would not do.
It's a pretty big
Okay.
file.
Police arrested a 35-year-old man suspected of throwing rocks and a Bible at a Colorado mosque.
Literally throwing a
saw
Bible.
that.
Yes. Surveillance video captured a person overturning benches, breaking windows, and hurling objects into the prayer area of the Islamic Center of Fort Collins. When they examined what objects he had thrown into the prayer center, they discovered he'd thrown a Bible. So he used rocks to break the windows of his local mosque and then chucked a Bible in.
Boy, that really looks
What-
good.
what is
Good for us.
What did he think was going to happen? They were going to come in, see this Bible laying on the ground.
And they'd be convicted. Or maybe it would cast out evil spirits, or, it's kind of maybe a Indiana Jones kind of a thing.
There was a Simpsons episode where the Flanders kids, Flanders, they had a video game, a Christian video game, where they threw Bibles at pagans. And if you hit them, they would convert. And then if you just nicked them, they become Unitarians.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
They're so much more clever than we are.
Yes, they are. But maybe he saw that and was thinking, if I could hit some Muslims with this.
hit a Muslim with a Bible, save a soul. See, it's funny because early Christians tended to be stonies, not stoners.
It's very true. Good point.
Where are we going with this?
We've
Stonies and stoners.
Yeah, and this was in Colorado, so stoners
that's what I was thinking.
is a whole different thing. But it just seems... How do you get that far off track? That you're throwing the first stone.
Well, if you think about it, there is a whole segment
what am
of
I supposed to think about?
Christian people
Yeah.
where the first response to something we disagree with is anger.
Yeah.
And it takes the form of not just throwing things, physical things at
throwing
people.
rocks and Bibles at people.
I'd be curious to know what this man's media consumption has been.
People throw rocks in terms of their words that they use just as
Sticks
violently.
and stones may break my bones, but Bibles will never convert me.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Okay, next story. So I think we can agree that's probably not what Jesus would do
Probably
I
not.
agree.
to his Muslim neighbors.
We are in agreement.
Next story, Satanists take aim at school spanking.
They're still school spanking?
Who's spanking?
Last week, worlds collided when the Satanic Temple's Protect Children project erected a billboard in Springtown, Texas, featuring the organization's goat skull logo and the caption, "Never be hit in school again." The billboard was reportedly torn down after just a single day. The website listed led to a form students could present to school officials explaining that hitting them violates their religious rights. The argument, which is yet to be tested in court, is that students can claim a deeply held religious belief that their body is inviolable, and that they must therefore be granted a religious exemption from corporal punishment. During the satanic panic of the 1980s, Satanists were falsely accused of abusing children. Now the Satanic Temple is able to claim the moral high ground over their conservative Christian opponents, some of whom have responded by alluding to Proverbs 13:24, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son."
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, Satanists were accused of child abuse.
Yeah.
So to clean up their bad press,
Now they're protecting children from Christians.
They are saying that Christians use corporal punishment, and therefore they're going to be advocates for not spanking kids.
I just don't understand. There is still spanking in schools?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Texas.
But these are private schools where you pay to be spanked, which you can also do in Las Vegas. Sorry.
Okay.
This guy.
Well,
he's like on a roll today.
Just lost our guest.
I will have to say, I went to a school in Mississippi and I was spanked at school.
I went to a private school for one semester in St. Louis, and they were still spanking there. But I did not get spanked.
Yeah, mine was 1979. And
mine was about the same time.
I did get paddled, and it actually deterred my behavior, bad behavior.
Did you get paddled in school? Are you in a school district that still paddles kids? Would you like Satanists to come and defend your children from
They should have like a hotline.
the paddle?
A Satanist hotline
Why was
for
the
kids.
billboard turned down? What's wrong with the
Torn
billboard?
down.
Isn't that what I said?
It was torn down or just removed?
Torn down.
Like people,
It doesn't really say.
like they hooked up their pickup trucks
yeah,
with
I don't
chains
know.
and ripped it down to the ground.
It doesn't say.
What would be wrong with the billboard?
Because it's showing
Because it's from
Satanist.
Satanists,
Yeah.
and it had satanic logos on it in Texas. You think that's going to go over?
Oh, well,
Satanic temples.
they were standing up for the children.
Satanic temples spoke against the conservative Christians that say, "Spoil the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child."
Well, isn't it a very unchristian thing to do to respond so reactionarily and angrily?
No, that's what Jesus did. He overturned the tables and he tore down the billboards. That's what Jesus did. Exactly what Jesus did. Satanic temple spokesperson. This is hard to say. Satanic temple spokesperson Whom?
Lucian Greaves.
Lucian Greaves. Do you need to play that music?
We really. I picture him as being like.
We need to have him on.
What's his name?
Severus Snape or the blonde?
Vincent.
Draco Malfoy.
Vincent Price.
Vincent Price. Yeah.
Yeah, or Draco Malfoy. Who's Draco Malfoy's dad?
Mr. Malfoy.
Lucius Malfoy. That's who I picture.
Greaves.
Lucian Greaves explained that the billboard was meant both to shame the school board and to help students imagine an alternative to accepting corporal punishment. And here's his quote. Never trying to stir up the pot. Here's the quote from Lucian Greaves. Hopefully our billboard, how would he say it? Hopefully our billboard will serve as a daily reminder to the citizens there. He's turning into Mr. Burns.
Another Simpsons reference.
That they live in a barbaric backwater town where dysfunctional and possibly sexually disturbed middle-aged men may titillate their depraved impulses by violently spanking teenage girls. And hopefully the billboard can also serve as a beacon of hope to the youth of Springtown, showing them that they do have recourse to protect themselves against this shameful savagery. What does it mean when the secularists are talking like 18th century Puritans?
That it's the end of Western civilization.
Well, it also means anything can be a religion, including humanism.
Anything can be a religion. Yeah. All right. Do you live in a barbaric, savage backwater where Satanists need to rescue from paddling?
Well, can we deal with the deeper issue here?
Oh, is there a deeper issue?
Yes. Do we think paddling in schools is...
for the love.
What? No, seriously. I mean, what do we think about that?
Corporal punishment
in school.
In school, I think most of Western civilization has moved on from that, and most parents no longer spank. And so they're not going to be comfortable with their school spanking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just emotionally wound my children.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good, Scott.
Even if I, as a parent, believe in spanking, which I did.
Yeah.
And then I still don't think I would want the school paddling my children.
But it's a holdover from a day where you expected not only that you would spank your kids, but that if your neighbor caught your kids doing something bad, they'd whop them upside the head.
I remember reading...
it takes a village to spank a child.
I remember reading Colin Powell's autobiography, which is really good, by the way, if anybody wants to. It's a very good read. He grew up in New York City, maybe Queens, I forget exactly where, but he talked about when he would get in trouble at school. On the walk home from school, every mom would be out on every porch, and every one of them would give him a spanking because word would get out from school about his behavior, and every mom took responsibility for every kid in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he'd get spanked by every mom as he went home.
Wow.
That turned out all right.
Fun.
Well, obviously we don't live in that culture anymore.
It worked for him.
It did apparently work for him.
And went on to be Secretary of State? What was his highest position? Was that his highest position?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We do have a guest today. There's no other news that isn't overtly political and not worth discussing. Although there was interesting stuff going on with Tim Keller and Princeton Seminary.
What was
come back to that.
They invited him to accept an award. They were going to give him an award and have him speak at Princeton Cemetery.
Him.
And then they decided he could still speak, but he would not get an award because of his conservative positions.
On women.
Women, primarily.
Yeah.
But, that is the conservative position on women.
Didn't they just disinvite someone else they were going to give an award to, and then...
Lucian Greaves?
No, it was somebody else.
Skye Jitani? Scot McKnight?
Did he go to Princeton?
No.
Do you know who he is?
Scot McKnight?
Yeah.
He's our guest.
Why, yes. He's one of our foremost New Testament scholars.
Well, I hope we can get him on the podcast.
We have a guest today. Our guest is Scot McKnight. Who you ask is Scot McKnight? Let me tell you. He is a world-renowned scholar, writer, and speaker. He's the Julius R. Manti Professor of New Testament at Northern Seminary in Lombard, Illinois. That's Northern Baptist Seminary, correct?
Yeah.
He's a Northern Baptist. When Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists have a fight, who wins?
They don't fight. They love each other.
Well, if they had a rumble, like the Sharks and the Jets.
It'd probably be the South.
Ooh, it's coming from the Mississippians.
I think they're better armed.
I do.
Because they're not going to bring a knife.
I think that battle's over. It's called the Civil War.
Oh, boy.
North one.
Thank you. Okay. He is the author or editor of more than 50 books, including Kingdom Conspiracy, The Jesus Creed, The King Jesus Gospel, and The Apostle Paul and the Christian Life.
Wow, he was busy.
He's also a popular blogger at Jesus Creed. JesusCreed.com. Is that what it is?
He's not sure.
You don't know where your blog is.
It's at Patheos.
Oh, okay. It's on Patheos.
Now owned by BeliefNet. The address is at Patheos.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a Patheos.
Just Google
blog.
Jesus Creed. You'll find it.
Google Jesus Creed or Google Scot McKnight. Why do you only have one T on your Scot?
He's Scottish.
As a child, I was told by my mom and my dad that it was because Scotland only has one T.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
When I learned Hebrew, I realized I didn't have a dagesh, so I didn't have a dot that doubles the letters.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've decided to opt for the dagesh interpretation when I'm with my Bible scholar friends. Otherwise, it's because Scotland had one T.
Okay. And you can't just put those two together and say it's because Scotland has no dogish?
Scotland has no dogish in its T.
That'd make a good T-shirt.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a book. We have a new book, and we talked about Adam and Eve, last year, about a year ago, I think, with John Walton.
Right. He wrote the book Lost World
of Adam and Eve after the Lost World of Genesis 1 in his ongoing Lost World series.
Right.
Who lost the World Series?
I can tell you, it was the Indians.
We all know that very well.
Yes, we do. And yesterday was opening day. We lost that.
Scott's new book.
Who won the World Series?
The Chicago Cubs.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That was this year. Yeah,
it was. I was there.
Chicago Cubs.
My son is the assistant scouting director for the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, you and I have to talk.
It wasn't like this didn't matter to us.
What?
We have to talk after the podcast.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, but we have a new book to talk about that has nothing to do with the Cubs. It's called Adam and the Genome. Adam and the Genome. Wasn't that a punk group? Do you remember?
Adam Ant.
Adam Ant and his genome. Adam and the Genome, reading scripture after genetic science. Contemporary genetic science indicates that humans descend not from an individual pair, but from a large population. What does this mean for the basic claim of many Christians that humans descend from Adam and Eve? Leading geneticist Dennis Venema? That sounds like a Harry Potter name.
Yeah, it does.
Severus Venema.
But not the Dennis part.
No, not the Dennis part. There's nothing sinister about Dennis.
But menacing.
The menace.
Dennis the Menace.
The menace, yeah. And popular New Testament scholar Scot with one T McKnight explore both the latest science and the biblical understanding of human origins in the new book, Adam and the Genome.
John Walton endorsed it.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I tried reading this book.
You did?
Uh-huh. I read about the first chapter, and I read the last chapter and the afterword.
Yeah.
And it's challenging.
Did you read the foreword and the afterword?
Yes. Okay. And I would have to say, you spent a lot of time researching this book.
Yeah, Dennis, I met Dennis at an event in Manhattan, at a BioLogos event.
Yeah, we all know what BioLogos is. Do you know what BioLogos is?
I don't.
It was started by Francis Collins. It's a group that promotes the understanding of science among basically conservative Christianity. So it would be kind of the anti-Answers in Genesis.
Okay.
What
would happen if they were in a war together?
Depends what kind of war. If it was intellectual,
win. Oh. Well, I'm not going to go there.
I'm going to go there.
I'm not going to go there.
You go with BioLogos.
Any day.
First, so your co-author is a geneticist.
That's right. So Dennis wrote a long article that was a part of a publication that got. Do you remember when the Calvin professors got in trouble on evolution?
Yes.
I don't. What happened?
And Genesis. Well, they wrote some articles about basically the issue was the historicity of Genesis 1 through 3, Genesis 1 through 4, Genesis 1 through 11, those hairy chapters. And I read Dennis's article, and I really liked it. I blogged about it. And then I met him at a BioLogos event in Manhattan. And then Dennis applied along with me for a BioLogos Templeton scholarship or grant to do the research for this book. Mm-hmm. So Dennis did the writing and the research for the first half of the book on evolutionary science and a response to intelligent design. And I did the research on how Adam was understood in the book of Genesis 1 through 2. What's Adam all about? And then I investigated how Adam was understood in Judaism. And then I investigated how Paul understood Adam. And so it was it's a sort of, if it is the case from genetic science that the DNA that currently characterizes human beings could not have come from less than 10,000 individuals. At one time they were saying a herd of individuals. Then they found that was a little insensitive to certain contexts. So now Dennis and the others talk about no fewer than 10,000 individuals. And the argument and the conclusion would be there never was two solitary human beings alone on planet Earth that we would characterize as our ancestors.
Right. Okay. So hang on there for a second. First of all, you're a New Testament scholar. Why are you trying to figure out Adam and Eve? Isn't that what Old Testament scholars are for?
I'm a Bible person. I'm a deacon in the Anglican Church. I preach and teach, and you bring up Adam, and the first question that anybody asks is, do you believe in the historical Adam? Because this has become central to many people's faith. And because if you're a New Testament person, you can't seal yourself off from the Old Testament. It's a single package. You got to deal with the.
But isn't there a union for that? Don't you have to be in a different union to deal with the Old Testament?
You do, I suppose, in certain circles.
Okay.
I've been amongst those sorts of people, but the Apostle Paul certainly didn't believe that he could only talk about the New Testament. He thought he was interpreting Scripture.
Okay.
So. That's a red herring there, Phil.
It is? Oh, I'm sorry. And what's the deal? Why does the Apostle Paul, what does he have to do with this? Why does anyone care what the Apostle Paul thinks about Adam?
Okay. Here's the complex construct that is involved when anytime you bring up Adam. And that is, people, I often say this, anytime you talk about evolution in evangelical context, someone, if not a bunch of someones, will raise their hand and ask if Paul believed in the historical Adam, and do you believe in the historical Adam? Because all roads in this conversation eventually get to Romans chapter 5, verse 12.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
And this passage. So you cannot avoid, and Dennis and I sat back and we knew the two major topics, and we're probably going to work on another book together. We knew the two major topics that result from evolution are the historical Adam and the image of God. And so this book did not deal with the image of God very much, just in passing. Mm-hmm. But the big issue is historical Adam. What does this mean when someone asks, do you believe in the historical Adam? And I'm quite willing to outline my view if you're interested in that at this point.
I think that's why we're here.
Well, can I ask? So are you saying that Paul seems to imply, if at first blush when you read his words, that he believed in a historical Adam, which is why all roads lead there?
All right, here's the question. What does historical with the word Adam mean? And here's what I believe it is. This is a loaded package with 6 or 7 elements in it. The minute someone asks if you believe in the historical Adam, it goes like this. First, was there 2 actual real individuals, Adam and Eve, neither of whom had belly buttons?
That wasn't in your book.
Should have had a scar or something like that in his rib.
Right.
And then the second element is there is a biological and procreative relationship between Adam and Eve and all human beings who descend from them.
Right.
And the third one, and this, of course, is implicit in modern day studies, and therefore, when someone asks this question, they have to believe that this is an element in it, is that their DNA is our DNA. So I call this a genetic Adam and Eve. And then here's where it goes. This is where it gets really important because of Genesis 3 and Romans 5 and St. Augustine and Aquinas and Calvin and Luther. And that is Adam and Eve, the real historical figures who are our ancestors, genetically sinned, brought death into the world, and passed that sin nature on to all people. So,
right, I'm with you. Preach it.
Okay. Then you would say this is the sixth element in the historical Adam question, and that is without their sinning and without passing on that sin nature, and if we are not connected to those two individuals or whatever, or if there weren't those two individuals, then not all human beings would be in need of salvation. So therefore, if you question the historical Adam, you question the very premise
right.
of the gospel.
You've destroyed our faith. Right? Am I right?
Well, no, I would say, no, I think you're wrong in saying that, but I think that's what people think.
Okay, so I'm right in saying that that's what they say.
That's exactly what they think.
Okay, I just wanted to know that I was right. That's all I wanted to know.
All right, so the issue then is, does the Bible teach that historical Adam construct? I'm a Protestant.
Yeah.
I want to go to the Bible. I want to see what it says.
Right.
So I investigated Genesis, I investigated Judaism, and I investigated Paul. And my overall conclusion is that no one in the Bible or the Jewish world prior to Jesus, Paul, that I've seen, believed in that historical Adam construct as I described it there, that construct probably is to be laid on the desk of Origen and St. Augustine.
What?
And it was handed on to Christians through them, and we have constructed our Christian theology largely on the basis of that doctrine of original sin.
Okay, so you think it's an early church development, not a New Testament reality?
Yes, I would say that. Yeah, I think you see one or two or three of those elements at work in maybe Judaism. Josephus clearly seems to suggest that Adam was a real human being.
But wouldn't that require us to form a whole new sense of original sin and kind of reshape our gospel?
Okay. No, I don't think it would. Because you would have to say then that Paul could, you could say yes.
The right question.
That Paul was actually preaching the gospel on a different basis than we are. I think that would be the case.
Oh.
So
Paul, here's the thing. In Romans 5:12, Paul says that all died because all sinned. He didn't say we died because we sinned. That's what Origen translated it as. In whom all sinned, and therefore the sin nature is passed on. That's the doctrine. That's largely where this doctrine develops. And Alan Jacobs, in his beautifully written book on original sin, tells this story very well. And he knows it's pretty hard to demonstrate that this is what's going on in the Bible. I think it's a reasonable explanation. I don't think that it is clear in the pages of the Bible. So to me, as Christian theology, that's sort of what we believe. But to say that it was anchored in the Bible is a different thing. Furthermore, now you have a problem. That is, if you believe that Adam and Eve were two solitary figures in the ancient world from whom everything descends. And when you read Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, It pretty much looks that way.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
You got a little problem in Genesis 4 when Cain takes off and finds a wife.
Yeah, and a city full of people.
Maybe.
All right. Can you tell me then, based on your Old Testament study, what the early Jews believed about where people came from?
God.
You don't want to? Are you swearing at us?
That's okay. I think that is the only answer that Jews had for where human beings came from, is they're the creation of God, God.
So they wouldn't say, they didn't have any hypothesis whatsoever of how people got here.
God.
Yeah, they had a hypothesis. God was the creator.
And do you see?
This is in their Bible. This is their first. Right. Let's just say you're dealing with a 4th century BC Jew who's writing a text, and they bring up Adam. The person brings up Adam. That person's source for the origins of life are Genesis chapter 1. So that's their only story. That's the only thing they know.
Mm-hmm. Well, then why wouldn't they take it literally?
They did.
So then they did believe in a historical Adam and Eve creation.
Okay, when you say, I'm going to give you a hard time anytime you use the word historical.
I'm ready for it.
What do you mean by historical?
That they were the first 2 people in the world that ever existed, and from them, everybody else came.
By and large, probably yes, but very few authors in the Jewish world actually say that. So they talk about Adam and Eve, mostly Adam. Eve is his neglected partner who gets flipped from most stories. But they're not into this question. But if you ask me, yeah, they probably believe that. They probably believed that Adam and Eve were the first 2 human beings. But they're not asking that question, and they're not pondering that question scientifically, archaeologically, genetically. They're not doing that sort of stuff.
Right. So
Right. So here's the thing for me. Science demonstrates the best science that we have from genetics. And I'm not talking about atheist, materialist philosophers. I'm talking about people like Francis Collins, who is a warm-hearted Nazarene evangelical believer, and Dennis Venema, who is at the same is an evangelical believer. What does he say? What do they say? There never was only 2 solitary human beings. Is that it was always in a population of at least 10,000, and they were almost certainly never in the same location.
Well, so does that mean that they believe God at one time created fewer than 10,000 people all over the earth?
No, they think it's the process of evolution.
So, Scott, if I can interject here, what you're saying then is early Jews, maybe even early Christians, had a view of a singular Adam and a singular Eve as the parents, or the what is it called, the progenitor, genetic source for all human life, but that the way Scripture is written, it does not preclude the possibility of a large group of human individuals. Is that fair to say?
No, I don't think I'd want to put it in any of those kinds of frameworks.
Okay.
This is going well.
Here's what happens. We try, what's happened here is at one time, Christians all believed that Adam and Eve were the first 2 people.
Yes, I can verify that.
Okay, and then along came science, and science quickly demonstrated to us that the Earth was not in the middle and the sun rotating around us, but we were rotating around the sun, and that changed some things. And then we realized that the age of the Earth, through fossil records, through carbon-14 dating, which is now a minor element in this discussion, that the Earth is far older than we expected, something like 3.5 billion years old, and the universe is something like 13.5 billion years old and expanding. And so all of a sudden things start changing. And then evolutionary biology and the fossil record of things like Australopithecus and African discoveries in the cradle of civilization outside of not Stellenbosch, but Johannesburg, we're finding things that demonstrate that human beings, something like us, existed about 200,000 years ago. All of a sudden now we realize that there were never two solitary human beings. And then furthermore, we've learned, haven't we? And we as evangelicals have been the most reluctant to embrace this, and that is that Genesis 1 through 3, especially 1 through 2, in many ways sounds like ancient Near Eastern creation narratives. We know this. Mm-hmm. It's different, but it sounds like this. And all of a sudden we have a different way of looking at Genesis chapter 1 through 3. John Walton has done this beautifully, looking at Egyptian and Sumerian and Babylonian creation narratives. And all of a sudden now Genesis starts to sound a little bit like those texts and a little bit not like those texts in very important diverging ways, but at the same time similar ways. So all of a sudden we can take a look at Genesis and do what St. Augustine said for us to do. St. Augustine said, basically, if you discover from scientists that something in the Bible is wrong, rethink your interpretation. What we have a lot of people today trying to preserve their interpretation and make it have some concord with science, rather than letting, as John Walton does, John Walton would just let Genesis speak in its own day, in its own way, to the people of that day, in that kind of language. So when you read Genesis chapters 1 through 2, and you see that a man's name is Dusty, or Clay, you could call him Clay.
Right.
That's a good Southern name. And his wife's name is Mama of all human beings. And you got a snake talking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You gotta wonder, well, maybe this isn't all what I thought it was. I think that's a legitimate question. You get to the genealogy of Genesis, and then you go, well, maybe it's something else too. So John Walton and Tremper Longman, my Old Testament reliable friends that I consult on these sorts of things, they would call Genesis 1 through 11 theological history. In other words, you can probe this stuff, and your attempt to find history and theology woven together will probably not always be successful, but it's telling the truth about humans and human nature, that in the Jewish world, and this is the dynamic reality of the Jewish text between the Old Testament and the New Testament, is over and over, Adam is the archetypal moral man. He is given by God a command to be obedient, and Adam chooses to be disobedient. So Adam becomes the archetypal disobedient human being.
But don't we need him to exist to play that role in our theology?
Okay. Mm-hmm. You think you need Job to exist for the story of Job to be true?
But that the story of Job isn't central to our theology, right?
Who other than Roman can you think of Jesus anchoring the kingdom vision of God in Adam theology? Can you think of Paul outside of Romans chapter 5, 12 through 21 and passing remarks in 1 Corinthians 15 ever bringing up Adam as critical to his theology? Can you think of John bringing up Adam? Can you think of Hebrews bringing up Adam? Did the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed bring up? No, it is not central to our faith.
Hang on, let me catch up. I'm still researching the first reference you gave.
I'm with you, Scott. The question is, though, as you pointed out at the beginning, people who ask the question, do you believe in historical Adam, they will always bring you back to Romans 5. So
that's right.
What do you do to answer them about Romans 5?
I mean, I write this chapter to answer them,
yeah.
But I have a whole chapter on that one. The basic idea to me
Breaks
is
it down.
Paul believes in what I call the literary Adam. He believes in the Adam of Genesis chapter 1. Paul never presses the case, as you would see in a couple Jewish texts, that he was a solitary human being along with a solitary Eve. He never really says that. So what Paul does is Paul takes up Genesis 1 largely through the lens of the Jewish tradition, and he sees Adam as the moral archetype of disobedience, and Paul makes him the foil of his Christology, where Jesus is the archetype of the Adam who is supposed to be the obedient one. So to me, what we find in Romans chapter 5 is a comparison of Jesus with Adam. We have no absolute necessity to say that because Jesus was a historical figure, Adam absolutely must be. All right, I don't think Job, all right, here's a good example. When the writer of Hebrews says Melchizedek didn't have a mother or a father.
Right.
That's impossible.
He was raised by wolves. He fell from the sky in a Coke bottle.
There you go.
Well, he could have been an abandoned baby that somebody found.
He would still have a mother and father somewhere.
Yeah, but an orphan, you could say, doesn't have a mother.
The point is,
anyway,
the writer can compare Jesus to a figure on the basis of how that figure is presented in a literary narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So
that's what I would say Paul is doing with Adam.
What do you do with folks who want to take it a step further beyond a comparison of Jesus and Adam based on historical existence and make it a theological point of imputation of unrighteousness or righteousness? Because they want to say we are righteous in Christ because he has imputed his righteousness to us. Similarly, we are unrighteous because essentially Adam imputed his unrighteousness to us. So if you can't do that with Adam, can you do that with Jesus?
Who imputed us if not Adam?
Right.
Okay, Paul doesn't quite say that.
Right, but that's the theology that's built around it.
That's our paraphrase.
This is the critical, I don't think we talk about Adam's righteousness, unrighteousness being imputed to us quite like that. But Paul does not say that Adam's sin was transferred to us. He says we died because all sinned. So Paul blames individual human beings for their sinfulness, for why they die. He never blames Adam. He does say Adam started this whole mess. And every Jew believes that.
Well, that's a little bit of all semantics wrapped up in there.
But it's an important distinction.
Well,
yeah, but
I'll tell you, here's the big one. Now, this is what I think is really the critical factor. The more you want to press for the historical Adam construct, the more likely that you're going to make the Bible wrong.
Ooh.
This is exactly what happens. The irony of those who critique Dennis and me, and they're critiquing me because they could care less about the science. They can't even read it. I'm serious. The number of people that I've seen reviews, I tried to read the science section and I couldn't understand it, so I just moved to the theology. The irony is they're critiquing the viewpoint, and because they want to defend inerrancy, and the result is they make the Bible errant.
How so? Unpack that just for a couple of minutes, then we need to wrap up.
All right.
I have one last question.
There never were two individual human beings, then to argue that there were two human beings makes it counter to what we know from science. And let me tell you, Phil and Christian and Sky, I taught college students for 17 years, and I taught the introduction to the Bible, and we read Genesis chapter 1. And I had numerous science students whose faith was on the line if evolution was rejected by biblical theology. Because they said, if it is, I'm going with science because I know it's true. So this is where I think we have to be more sensitive to the science student. The science student is looking at us and saying, if you're going to tell me that there were only two human beings, I know the Bible's a load of crock, and this is not true. So therefore it's wrong, and why should I trust it? The number one reason, I've investigated this, I've written an article on it. The number one reason why young evangelical Christians and why evangelical Christians leave the Christian faith is because of the conflict of their interpretation of Genesis 1 through 3 with science.
So in other words, we're fighting the wrong battle.
We're fighting, what we're doing is creating a set of categories that inevitably makes us duped.
I have one last question.
Okay.
So if you, after you and Dennis have studied all of this, and I understand your premise that there was fewer than 10,000 people that were...
No fewer
than 10,000 people that were the original beings on this earth. How do you believe creation of man began?
Well, I think the answer is this is an answer that can be investigated by science. The answer of science is some sort of explosion they usually call the Big Bang. And that written into the fabric of what God allowed to explode into being was DNA that had an inevitable direction to it that would lead to human beings as we know them now. So we are the result of an evolutionary process that becomes conscious of our being image bearers, conscious of our responsibility before God to obey God and to steward this earth on God's behalf. I would say the evolutionary process is scientifically demonstrable. It has powerful predictive value, which is one of the great things of scientific theory. And as a result of that, we would say that human beings are the result of an evolutionary process.
Okay, but I lied. I have one more question. But the problem is then there has to be a moment where God and man, have this conversation, which is, don't do this because if you do and disobey me, you die.
Okay, I would answer that by saying yes and no. The conversation between Adam and Eve and God in the garden is representative of every human being's responsibility before God. Adam and Eve are the archetypal humans. They are everyone, not just two solitary beings, but everyone confronts the moral demand of God upon their life through the consciousness that God has created in us.
This is too troubling for my mind.
So in other words, Adam and Eve are representative.
I get it, but I still think God has to appear to somebody and say, I am God and you are not, and this is what I tell you to do. And if you...
Well, that's the process of God's self-revelation, which is what Scripture's all about.
Yeah, but...
When did he begin to reveal himself?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Does everyone agree with you at the Baptist seminary?
Well, I haven't sat around and asked.
I'm avoiding those conversations.
I can assure you that I have no colleagues who have the education or the scientific study to evaluate the first half of the book on evolutionary biology.
I will tell you, I did try to read that, and after the first 5 pages, I just skipped to the second half. So I'm not quite sure how we're supposed to get through that first half.
All right, if you want to check it out, the book is Adam and the Genome, Reading Scripture After Genetic Science. You can form your own conclusion after reading Scott and Dennis the Venema's work, as opposed to Dennis the Menasa. Menamasa. I'm going to sum it up in a song.
Go for it.
I'm going to completely sum all of this up in a song. Completely. We just spent some time with Scot McKnight. Yeah, he's really theologically putting up a fight, 'cause he's just trying to get the Bible right, so all of our scientific kids don't have a fright and walk away from their faith, because we threw it all back in their face. That if you don't buy it, this isn't the place for you. And now Scott and Dennis have come up with a way that you can believe even without Adam and Eve representing you literally instead of literarily. It's literal. Literally, not literally.
It's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Whether you agree or not, we hope you found this discussion enlightening, and I hope you check out Scot's book. Do we have any announcements this week?
Yes. Two quick announcements. Short announcement. I'm finally pressured by one of our interns. I'm on Instagram.
Yay!
But
why should we care about that?
Bill, here's the thing. I hate social media. I don't want to be on Instagram. I've resisted it for a long time, but I've been convinced I need to do it. And my 15-year-old daughter was the one who was haggling me on a long car ride about it. So we made an agreement that I'll be on Instagram, but she's going to manage the account. So
That'd
if you
be fun.
follow me on Instagram, you will actually be getting my daughter's perspective on my life, which could be highly entertaining. So we'll see how that goes. Second big announcement is if you have or have not signed up for my daily devotional subscription, we have just changed the entire subscription format.
Oh, no.
So it's much easier now, actually, and better for everybody. I won't bore you with the details except to say that now anybody who makes any donation to my ministry of any amount will automatically be signed up for With God Daily, and you get access to the 3+ years of archives. So you can do that at my website, skyjatanya.com, or on withgoddaily.com. But here's the big part. If you are a current subscriber, and I thank you for that, I need you to do a big favor for me. Effective basically immediately, all of your existing subscription payments have been canceled. So you are all effectively getting the devotional for free, which is great for you. And that will continue whether
Except
you
I
do
donate
nothing.
anyway.
Well, yeah, if you already donate, don't have to do anything. But if you've never donated to the ministry before, you're now getting the Devo for free. It would be immensely helpful, in fact, critical for me, if you go to With God Daily or skyjatanya.com and sort of re-sign up now through the new system with the donations. It's totally tax deductible. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, so there's a benefit to you there. You can donate as little as $2 a month, same as the subscription to the Devo before. So I appreciate you guys making that switch. It'll make the credit card system a heck of a lot easier for everybody. It will simplify things. I know it's a little bit of a technical headache, but if you can do that, it'd be immensely helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, one last announcement. If you participated in our family devotional survey about 6 months ago, or I forget how many months ago, you're going to get an email because we've actually used your survey results to try to come up with a solution to make family devotionals less stinky. So you're going to get an email inviting you to participate in a little experiment. Look for it in the next day or two. Okay, we will see you next week. Thank you again to Scot McKnight with 1T for being on the show, and we'll see y'all later. Goodbye.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.